one of the things I wanted to ask you during this conversation was about installation in general. And your approach toward installation very well could change as a result of this leadership council.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, it was an issue to a large number of the people around the room. Everybody is impacted by it to some degree. We all need quality installation for success of our particular silo, but for the success of the whole industry. From the WFCA standpoint, Dave, I'll answer that first. We began to realize that to become relevant, when that was one of the first conversations I had with you, is how does the WFCA become relevant to the industry? Well, the easiest way to become relevant is to discover what the pain points are. And if I can solve what's causing you pain, then I'm necessary to you. I'm relevant. Everywhere I go, the number one issue is installation. It's not just finding installers, it's finding qualified installers, it's finding certified installers. And just know that we are focused on the issues that cause pain to retailers. And right now we're doing everything we can to address the issue of installation, whether that's working with these other associations, working with CFI, who's become a good partner to us. We've been doing the regional trainings across the United States. Got another one going on, I think, next week in Pomona. I was with Tom Jennings and Robert Varden at this meeting of the FCLC. And they are passionate about this, not because it's a profit center for them, but because they care about the people that look to this for their livelihood.
Well, it is the one thread that runs through everything.
That's
Everybody
correct.
needs insulation, and many of the people install various types of floor covering products.
Well, and that's the difference, Dave. 15 years ago, maybe it didn't make sense for associations to come together on installation because you had specific installers who did marble, and you had somebody else who did wood, and you had someone else who did soft surface. Now for installers to be successful and to carry on the livelihood, they've got to be masters of all of those things. And so you have an organization like CFI who trains people and certifies them in all these categories. And that's the kind of partner we kind of latched onto.
So is there potential? I mean, there are installation groups, NWFA, the CFI. Is there a potential somewhere down the road for these people to come together, work together more closely than they do
Certainly,
now?
and we've already had some high-level conversations like that, if it makes sense. It's got to make sense to the associations, first of all. We're not trying to negate anything that already exists. We're trying to build on it. And so if one of us is here and one of us is here, let's get us to the same level, and then let's see where can we go from here?
Yeah.
What can we do together?
I've got you. Well, it's interesting, and especially with the installation standard becoming finalized.
Yeah, it's kind of the perfect storm.
At some point.
Yeah, you got the standard on the final edges of being finalized at this point. You've got all these organizations coming together. You've got every retailer saying it's an issue to them. If there's ever been a time the industry needs to pay attention and say, we've got to fix this, it's now.
Yeah.
And as you and I were talking off camera, I mean, this is something that's been talked about for years. It's not a new conversation. You had the lull during what I call the 7 years of the Great Recession because we had more carpet and floor covering products than we needed installers for. There wasn't a lot being sold, in other words. So you had a generation of installers that looked to other fields to create their livelihood. You also lost a generation of installers that would have apprenticed somebody coming in.
Yeah.
You didn't have that
It was
anymore.
generation lost.
Yeah, and so now what you're seeing is a greater need, a lesser supply. I mean, this thing, and it's not hit yet. I mean, we're just seeing the uptick of business. If business really turned, we would have a challenge that would be having a very negative impact on our industry.
Well, there are many retailers now having troubles as we speak because of that.
And Dave, add to the perfect storm the subcontractor issue.
Yeah.
Where now you've got where if a retailer has his own installers, he's okay. But if he has subcontract installers and they work primarily for him, the government's trying to prove that they're actually his employees. Does a couple of things. It gets them over that 50 ratio for the Affordable Care Act, and it also causes them to have to provide a lot of benefits and resources to these people. And so now you've got installers needing to set themselves up truly independently. They're looking for somebody they can latch onto that will help them achieve a level of professionalism, and we've got people that are interested in making that happen.
Very interesting. Now, in terms of the S600 installation standard, I see two hurdles. Number one, just making it known, make everybody know that, hey, there is such a thing. I don't know how many people are aware of it. I would expect most people aren't.
Yeah, it's more of an internal thing. I think a lot of people internally are aware. I wasn't very aware of it until I took this position over a year ago, but Tom Jennings, who is on our staff and who you've recently interviewed, has become the chairperson of that and headed it up. Tom was involved long before he was a staff member for WFCA, and everybody on that committee felt like it had gone on too long. And so we're glad to be coming to the end of this and to begin to have a standard that allows us to function under a guideline that's consistent across the board.
Yeah, so awareness, building awareness, number one, and then training people, certifying them, however that's going to happen. That's the other big hurdle, and that's something that I guess is going to take some time.
It will, and we'll rely on a lot of the people that are in this full time, you know, like CFI, like Install, John McGrath. You've been interviewing a lot of these people, and thank you for keeping this on the forefront because it is a big issue. For an industry our size to not have a standard for one of the key flooring products in carpet is kind of amazing to me. And you know, this is something that will be good for the whole industry. And so we're really excited. We'll rely on a lot of those people that are doing this already, but we'll certainly be putting our efforts behind it to expand it.
How long, how do you see the framework being set up to actually do this certification? I mean, will there be, is this just an unknown at this point?
A lot of it is unknown. I mean, we've been so busy trying to get it finalized and get it through the process to get it to become an ANSI standard. I do know that we certainly want to make sure that the standard is controlled, and that's not a financial thing. That's just making sure that the people that are training it are qualified and carrying on the quality of the standard. Listen, a lot of people invested a lot of their own money, and John mentioned this, and he's one of many. Invested a lot of their own money and their own time to create a standard that was supposed to take 3 years and has ended up taking over 5. They need to be treated fairly in this process too. And so all of that's going to be considered, but we've got to make sure that the certification that's out there doesn't really bastardize what everybody has put this time and effort into.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch this happen. You've been with the organization heading this WFCA about a year and a half.
Yeah, just close to a year and a half.
Something like that. Update us on what's happened up to this point in time. And I know there's lots of things that are on your plate. Talk about some of those.
I'll hit some of the high points. I think one of the first things was for us to identify who our target was and to really have more of a rifle approach than a shotgun approach. And that is that we're going to focus on improving the independent retailer and helping the independent retailer compete in their marketplace, whether that's against the big box store or it's simply learning how to truly do some of the skill sets that are necessary for success. We partner with people on the outside who have expertise in this, that are willing to go in and ask questions of people and say, listen, how do you do what you do today? Is it working for you? Have you considered? And help them to find new standards and processes that will allow them to compete. I mean, one of the biggest findings for me, Dave, was that 25% of the retailers have gone out of business over the last 7 years, and that number fluctuates. Some people say in the last 5 years. No matter what you say, it's dwindling.
Yeah.
And I can also tell you from my background in 25 years at Shaw, but 40 years in the industry, my dad owned a carpet mill. We need strong independent retailers for this industry to survive. And so we've got to invest there, and that was one of the big things. We have begun to have a meeting every July. We're on a fiscal calendar with our committee, our executive committee, and so as soon as the new executive committee comes on, we create a visioning committee. We bring in some other players, even people not necessarily on the board, and say, okay, what's our long-term plan? What's our 1, 3, and 5-year plan? And we throw some things out there that if I shared them with you, you'd go, well, what are you thinking? But that's what brainstorming is all about. But we've begun to focus, ironically, on some of the same issues that the Floor Covering Leadership Council has. You know, from a technological standpoint, how do we have a greater impact? How do we help people deal with this issue of installation? What's the best thing that we can do? How can we continue to improve the level of education within this industry? And for me personally, the thing that kind of drove me to look at this position, how can we simplify people's lives? How can we make business easier to do so that you've got people that grew up into their position and now are owners, that they own the business and the business doesn't own them? Yeah. And so we're constantly evaluating vendor partners, resources, tools, anything we can do to make sure that life is easier and people are able to make a good profit.